Welcome to the HR Empowerment Podcast, where we will uncover strategies and new insights from HR professionals who discuss up-to-date regulations, best practices, and the most pressing topics like diversity and equity, leadership, dealing with difficult situations, and much more that affect your bottom line and business. Thanks for joining us.
Hey everybody, Wendy Sellers here, the HR lady. Welcome back to our show. We are here today to talk about, so many things about how understanding who you are empowers how you lead. I don't know. Leading is kind of important in today's workplace. Today we are with a very cool guest, Archana Mohan. Hey, how you doing?
Hi, Wendy. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, I'm so excited to have you here. You are a dynamic, multilingual chief operations and technology officer within the finance sector. Oh boy, I need you. But I love that you have a passion for unlocking human potential. So tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are now.
So I have a very squiggly line career path. I started my career in teaching. I worked with learning disabled kids in New York City schools. And then after doing that for about a decade, went back and got my MBA and fell into finance as you do. And then kind of made my way through the world of finance and have been in finance for the last a little over 2 decades, doing a number of roles and trying to understand how that world works, and never quite found my place. If I'm honest, I was looking for how to have an impact, how to get my voice to be heard, how to help others grow. And it's through that sort of journey that I've discovered this sort of hidden passion for collaboration, working with folks who are entering the industry, training, coaching, and just guiding and problem solving together. So that's how I ended up where I am today.
I love it. And where are you located?
I live in London now. I spent 20 years in the US, as you can hear from my slight accent. I studied over there and worked over there, and then moved back to Europe in 2003 to be with my family.
Wow. So yeah, you're definitely world traveler and world experience. And I love it. Thank you so much for bringing our listeners, just an international experience, because if you haven't traveled as a professional or just as a human, you usually get caught up in your own world. So I love your book. It's titled The Through Line, How Understanding Who You Are Empowers How You Lead. I love that. So for, our listeners, many of our listeners are in HR, management, ops, and many of them are in all of that and they don't have HR, so they have the HR hat on. But so I'm just going to say, call everybody HR leaders. For HR leaders trying to coach or develop leadership talent, what practical steps can they take to help others discover their own through line, as your book says?
Yes, thank you so much for that question, because I think, firstly, if I may, I'd like to step back and just tell people what a through line is, or how I define it in the book, and
Yeah.
why it matters, or why anyone should care. I think as I was navigating my own journey, I was searching for a center or core of who I was and what I stood for. But I think the world of work gives us a lot of signals and teaches us a lot of things about who we should be, who we should aspire to be. And often the answer to those questions is we want something more. We need to be more educated, more experienced, more technical, more people friendly, more empathetic. And it's always about more. And I started to wonder, but what if actually the secret is understanding ourselves first, understanding who we are, so that we can then show up in the workplace and do the good work that we all are doing. And that's what I call that through line. That's sort of your anchor, your center of gravity, the thing that holds you strong even when the storms around you are swirling. And
Right.
so when I wrote the book, I was trying to think about what I wished someone had told me when I started in finance to navigate these uncertainties that I was inevitably going to come across. And I came up with a three-part framework, which I use internally in the business that I work for to help teams kind of navigate difficulties. And so it's very simple and probably incredibly intuitive when you think about it. But basically, it starts with reaching in. So look inward, figure out who you are, what you want, who you want to be. Then reset. The world's going to give you a bunch of information. What do you do with that? Do you rethink your preconceived notions? Do you change your thesis about the world, how you want to show up? And then reach out, because at its core, in my opinion, leadership is all about connection. So if you don't reach out, I feel like you're only doing part of the job. You need to connect with the people around you. And then I think you have shown up in the workplace as you want to, because there isn't
Right.
really a right formula. It's different
Yeah,
for
there's
everyone.
really not. And thank you for bringing that up because I say it all the time. Leadership is not a role. Leadership is not a title. Leadership is an action, and leaders with high self-awareness are going to then be able to go to the next step and be aware of others. They're going to be much more effective, empathetic, and more likely to be promoted as well, regardless of what your title is. And so it's so, so important. I mean, it's part of that whole emotional intelligence, formula is that you can't become emotionally intelligent unless you are grabbing that mirror and going, "Ooh, where do I fit in here?" And my book, Suck It Up, Buttercup, Be a Leader, People Will Follow. I also talk about the fact that if you can't grab that mirror, you're not going to be able to lead. You might be
I
part
think
of the
there's
problem.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. I think self-awareness takes two forms, doesn't it? There's that wonderful piece of research by Tasha Eurich where she talks about self-awareness is comprised of two things: internal self-awareness, knowing who you are, but external self-awareness, knowing how others perceive who you are. And both of
Yes.
those pieces matter. It's not just about sitting in a dark room and trying to work out who you are. It's also taking information from the world around you about how you show up.
Yeah.
Without that, I think you're kind of functioning and without all the information.
Right, right. You're trying to be this tough person and I'm
Yeah,
going to be in charge and it's like, no, 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 that stuff went away a long time ago. It
yeah,
never really worked anyways. People just did it because they were afraid of you, not because they respected
yeah,
you, right?
exactly.
And if your employees are afraid of you, they're certainly not going to go above and beyond. They're not going to be engaged and they're not going to be productive. And in many cases, depending on your company, it might actually be a safety issue too. I was reading a study recently, it was from the Niagara Institute that said 100% of leaders who improved emotional self awareness reported better workplace effectiveness. 79% of them reported stronger relationships, like you just mentioned, and 81% saw reduced stress. Oh, I'll take that.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Sign me up.
Sign me up. Reduce stress. Heck yeah, sign us both up. Here, I have another question for you. You emphasize the importance of leaning into discomfort, and not everybody's good with that. So, how can HR professionals or professionals, period, support the folks that are below them? Again, regardless of what their titles are, but emerging leaders. How can we support emerging leaders through the discomfort that comes with change, feedback, or even crisis?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the $1 million question, right? I've thought a lot about this because I'm really bad with discomfort. So I will say that off the bat. I really like calm, cool, lots of time to think about it, no stress environments. But I've also noticed that I tend to learn the most when the discomfort is greater. Now, there has to be the right balance. It can't be complete crisis, complete chaos, because then you're in panic mode and you're doing something different. But I think a little healthy dose of discomfort is good for growth and it's good for learning. So the question is, how do you lean into that? How do you make sure that when the discomfort arrives, you're not freaking out? I think the real answer is you've got to practice for it. So you've got to train yourself to be able to navigate uncertainty when crisis is not high, so that when crisis is high, you kind of have a playbook that you can rely
Right.
on. Um, and I guess one way I model it in the workplace, or I hope to model it, and I would encourage others to, is to normalize that discomfort is normal. Like it doesn't matter that you're feeling uncomfortable. Nothing bad is going to happen to you. You can make mistakes. This is what Amy Edmondson always talks about when she's talking about psychological safety, right? You want to create an environment where people feel safe to be uncomfortable and to voice that discomfort, to have the language to share it. and then to work together in a purpose-led and purpose-aligned kind of strategy to solve for it. Because as people who work in businesses, I think one of our core purposes is to solve problems for others in whatever shape that shows up. But we can't problem solve if we're uncomfortable with discomfort, because by definition, a problem is uncomfortable.
Right.
So I think you just kind of have to accept it and then work to solve for it, knowing that you may not get to the answer right away.
Yeah, absolutely. What are your thoughts on um accepting discomfort and the connection with emotional intelligence?
Yeah, so I think it's highly correlated. I think those in my sort of environment who are the best at problem solving, navigating discomfort are also the most emotionally aware, in my opinion. Now, of course, that's a subjective judgment. That's how I perceive them. But I notice that they are able to read rooms. They are able to call it when they see folks getting nervous or worried or twitchy. They say, look, I can see this is hard. What could we do differently? How could we brainstorm this differently? Do you need a moment? Discussing the emotions in the room and being open to disagreement and nuance is really important.
Right.
But in order to do that well, you have to be willing to not only accept your own emotions, but those of the people in the room, and they may not necessarily align with yours, right?
Right?
And so you've got to kind of go there. And
Yeah.
actually, it's interesting. You were talking about I've traveled, and actually, this applies whether you've traveled or not. When we come together in a workplace, we come from all different walks of life and all different backgrounds, and often a whole host of ways of dealing with emotions. Some of us just shut them down. Others want to talk about it day in and day out. And a third group are kind of somewhere in the middle. So as a leader, you have to kind of know how to get the best out of everyone, but accept that not everyone will have the same formulaic response to different situations.
Yeah. And I wanted to talk about I'm glad you brought that up. Just like the world in itself, regardless of where you're located, is high pressure. It's
Yeah.
high pressure work environments. And then we're putting, we as leaders, whatever your title is, we're being pressured. We're shoving that down. And we sometimes forget that, hey, they're not where we are. And they're probably not getting paid anywhere close to where we are. And they haven't gone through what we did. And they don't know why we're being pressured because they haven't been communicated with. So I talk about this all day, every day, is like so much of the information in our head as leaders, and we forget to share it with our employees and let them know, hey, yeah, things are going a little, triggery right now, but we have a plan. Otherwise, at least here in the United States right now, a lot of people are worried about, layoffs and terminations and staff cutting and saving money. And the executives might be like, no, that's not happening. Share that information, right? So I talk about a lot in my life, and then in my books I talk about values, company values, and I just think they're so important. I firmly believe company values should not just be on the business development marketing page, right? They should be in the careers page, they should be in the handbook. I even, for all my clients, I'm an HR consultant. When I'm helping them write or rewrite their job descriptions, I put all the company values in the job
Awesome.
descriptions so that we could say these are the actions you're supposed to be performing productivity wise, but these are the behaviors you're going to be expected to comply with. And then we can say, all right, now we're aligned or we're not aligned. Because when my phone rings all day, every day with somebody having a problem, it's just because somebody's acting a fool, not because they can't do their job, but we forgot to tell them, oh, you're expected to behave this way. And I think that goes back to what you were just talking about discomfort. And, like, what do you think are some signs that leaders, HR leaders, or leaders in general, can watch out for that indicate that someone, especially a manager, might be misaligned with the company?
I think that's such a fabulous question because so in order for someone to identify that, or a person to identify that another isn't aligned with the values of the company, you need to know what they are.
Right?
And you need to have actually verbalize it. So as you say, talk about them, live them, breathe them, define the behaviors associated with them. It's not good enough to just have the poster on the wall. Like, I
Right.
think you really have to know who you are as a company. And I think therefore the through line really applies to firms just as much as it applies to people. Once you know those things, my experience tells me that we often feel more stressed when we're in environments where our values don't align with the values of the environment. So let's say, for example, trust is a core value in a business, and yet I'm quite that's probably a bad example of value alignment. Let me think of a different one. Clients first, for example. A lot of companies will say one of our values is we put clients at the heart of everything we do. But then you
Hmm.
go into the business and you see that the real driver of the business outcomes is profitability. You know, how much money are we making? What are our margins? Now, you could potentially find a person who says, but you said we're client first, but actually the first thing to get cut every single time is client-led initiatives. So how are those two things aligned? Over
Yeah.
time, that person is going to start getting bitter. They're going to perhaps get angry, resentful, burn out, start not showing up to work. I think that's a sign. It's a sign that there's a disconnect between what the company says and how they behave, and therefore employees have a hard time aligning with it because they're not really sure. Like, you
Yeah.
told them one thing, but you do something different. And I
Right.
think uncovering that is really important.
Yeah, here's your sign, right?
Yeah.
Here's your sign. This isn't what you actually said you're going to be doing. And it's so important. So for folks that are listening, if you're in HR, if you're in the executive suite, please go look at your marketing page and hopefully it's on your careers page too of what your company values are and really step back and say, is that accurate? Because if it's not accurate, it's time to change them. And I'm not, advocating changing them so that you can just be only focusing on profit, but your employees know. And so just tell the truth, just tell the truth so you can hire people that are aligned with the company values. You can keep them on board while they're aligned with the company values. And if they're no longer in line with them because they don't want to be, then let them go find a job somewhere else where they'll be a better fit. But do know that if you're only focused on money, eventually you're going to stop being able to attract and retain employees because they still want to, they want to feel good about what they do. It's not just about the money itself. And I think that that goes with your topic of discomfort and change and feedback. And then again, about emotional intelligence. I have another statistic here that said employees led by highly emotionally intelligent managers are 4 times less likely to quit versus those who have
Wow.
lowly emotionally intelligent managers. That was a mouthful. So times less likely to quit if their manager it has high emotional intelligence. So that means, yeah, you still got to pay them good. You still got to give them benefits, and that's an issue back here in the United States. But it doesn't. Maybe you don't have to give them the biggest amount of pay and all the benefits and all the PTO and everything else, bonuses and everything. I'm not saying don't. If you have the money, do it. But we really should be focusing on training our managers on empathy, on, self-awareness, like you were talking about, and on overall emotional intelligence. And then I would even say interviewing for that, right?
Yeah, and I don't think it's something we interview for because we tend to interview. I don't know if this is your kind of experience with this, but I feel like many of us start in our careers and the first thing we learn are technical skills, right? We master, I don't know, in finance it's the math, right? And then eventually, because our work output is good, we are promoted, but we are promoted for a certain type of skill. And then we become a manager, but we've never been taught how to manage others. We've just barely learned how to manage ourselves, and now we're being told, well, run a team because you're really good at the math. You can now run people, and the thing is, all of that is assumes so many things about the individual that they understand others, that they want to understand others. I mean, look, at a very high level, you could even argue there are some people, and I have friends like this, who just do not want to work in a big corporation running big teams. They're not interested. That's not what they got into the workplace for. They want to do the technical skills. That's what floats their boat. So I guess it's a long-winded way of saying, I think training for the soft skills that everyone's always talking about is just as important as training for the technical skills. And
Yeah.
we forget that. we just think people can do it naturally because we're people, but that's not really the case, is it?
Right, right. No, we might be able to hang out with our friends, but we're using like emojis and everything
Yeah.
in text message and everything. And it's interesting that you said that while you were talking. I did a quick Google search of like are younger people learning soft skills, and it basically said that yeah, a lot of younger people want to learn them, but pros and cons of a lot of remote work is it pulled back on the I don't want to say on the need for soft skills, but it kind of like hid them. It's like I don't have soft skills, so I don't have to verbally communicate somebody because I just have to email or text. And whether you're remote or in person, I would like to say to employers that are listening, it doesn't matter. We still all need the soft skills. So if you're thinking your employees are starting to, slack on their soft skills, how about we have more live meetings? You don't have to be in person. We could do exactly what you and I are doing right now of Zoom and having it on video and letting them know. Please just let your employees know that they're going to be on video if that's not normally your thing, because there's going to be some other issues like such as the clothes that they're wearing or not wearing that you might have an issue on. Right? But don't blame. My point is, don't blame just the younger people about not having these soft skills because they're always using technology to communicate. It's still up to us as employers to say, okay, this is how we communicate. This is when, these are the meetings, these are the expectations. And folks, line that all up in the interviews, line that up when you're onboarding so people know you're going to have to communicate a lot in this organization. We've made it easier. Here's all the tools. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's absolutely right. I mean, there's basic things like when you have an issue or when you have a client query, do you tend to email, send a Teams message, or pick up the phone? What's your preference? And if the answer 89% of the time, sorry, 90% of the time is I like to email, you might want to train a little bit for the phone conversations.
Right.
Because what I've found is that when there's a thorny issue, email's not a great medium for solving the thorny issue because often things get misunderstood. We say one thing, we mean something different. The other person hears a third thing. Whereas when you pick up the phone or you engage over a Zoom call or a Teams call, not only can the person see your face, so there's body language associated with that. And I get it's different to being in the same room as a person, but still it's better than not being visible via email. And you can ask questions, you can get curious, you can truly solve the person's problem. So you have to learn how to do it. And I think probably I'm of a certain age now. So I've been doing this a long time and I feel like we learned how to communicate. I mean, communication skills were a thing that were taught. We didn't just, it wasn't assumed that you would know how to do that.
Yeah.
And I don't think we do that as much anymore. And we should remember it's important because
Yeah.
ultimately we're humans and we need to connect. And the best way to connect is to communicate. And if we can't communicate, it's more challenging.
Right. And everybody communicates differently. And I do a lot of
Absolutely.
I love like personality assessments,
Yeah.
I do a lot of training on personality styles and personality traits. And I just love it. I mean, number one thing I learned was about me and that, okay, I need to control, adapt, change my personality style or trait or approach just for a hot minute just so I can communicate to the person and I get out what I want to say and see if they connect. And once I learned that, and that fortunately was earlier on in my career in HR, it changed my life. It really did. I really realized that because I'm a very dominant, direct, matter of fact person, and not everybody appreciates that. So I had to really learn, like, okay, with this person over here, you need to tone it down, Wendy. You need to give more facts in this conversation. You need to have in person, and I don't know, learn to listen.
Yeah, it's a hard skill. That's a skill too, right? I mean, you could argue some people need to learn to listen. Um, you're obviously a really good listener. You wouldn't be running a podcast, but the point is sometimes we're on send because we're just so desperate to get the idea out. And in the context of a team, you have personalities who are very extroverted, who always want to get things out. And then you have some personalities that do better reflecting, thinking, and then they have incredible um, thoughts and insights to share, but they need time. And so when you have a mixture in the workplace, I think you as a leader, as a coach, as a mentor, you want to be able to give all of those personalities time to flourish because otherwise we end up with one-dimensional workforces where everyone's the same, everyone's cookie cutter, everyone comes from one format. And actually, I think there's value in having lots of different personalities in a room because you think more creatively when you have to problem solve in that context.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. But you need to be prepared for that.
Yes.
If you're going in there going, oh, it's the same old, and
No,
everybody's
no, no,
just
no.
like me, it might seem comfortable, but it's not going to be productive, and it's certainly not going to be creative, think outside the box. And so your competitors are going to fly by you, right?
Yeah.
And so it's super important to understand that people are different. And while it might be discomfort for you, that we need different mind thoughts, we need different, experiences in the room. Speaking of different experiences, wow, you've worn many hats: teacher, chief operations and technology officer, a multicultural leader. How have those experiences shaped your leadership lens? And what should, our listeners consider, especially if they are in human resources, when building leadership pipelines that really should reflect diversity and background, and as we just mentioned, thought?
Um, I think we need to start earlier. So we talk a lot about recruitment pipelines, and of course, it's important to think about where are you going to recruit from and how are you going to recruit. But I think probably because of my background as a teacher, I think it starts in school. I think we need to be talking about potential careers with kids. We need to be teaching kids how to communicate, how to build emotional flexibility, how to work with others, collaborate, work through conflict, get comfortable with discomfort. I think if you model it early, it's easier to integrate because kids are so malleable and so flexible and they kind of just get it. They know, well, I want that toy, she wants that toy. How am I going to negotiate so that I get bedtime, she gets bedtime, you know? Um, and then I think there's a certain degree of moving away from the standard cookie cutter approach to some firms where they tend to always recruit from, the best universities with a certain type of degree. Maybe there's interesting thought experiments to be had by prioritizing lived experience, going to different environments to recruit, not just universities, because there are lots of really intelligent, really thoughtful people who have never been to university. And that is an entire untapped market that we should think about. And then finally, I think it would be good to recognize the foundational skills that, regardless of sector and regardless of job type, we all need. So it's like I said before, it's how do we compromise? How do we build empathy? How do we learn to negotiate? These are things that serve us well no matter what our jobs are. And I think
Yeah.
we should look for those when we're interviewing and recruiting. And then we would have workplaces that really prioritize diversity of thought, that really encourage diverse opinions, where diversity is no longer a box to be checked, but it's
Right.
actually a foundational value.
Yeah, and it empowers how you lead, right?
Yes, I agree.
Exactly, down to what you've talked about in your book. I have another stat here, kind of on that same thing here, and it's from ADP. Employees who feel cared for are 92% more engaged and 65% more loyal. So I'll take both of those. People might think, oh, 65%. Yeah, no, right now the loyalty is pretty darn low, especially if there's many opportunities available. But 92% more engaged. Engagement means they're going to do what you want them to do, and they're all in it together. We're all in it to win it. And we all know why we're in it and what we're going after and what the goals are. And that requires communication, communication, communication. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think the most beautiful thing you said was just this idea that people who feel cared for, sorry, are more likely to feel engaged. I mean, just think about a personal example in your own home or in your own friendship circles. When you feel cared for, you feel safe. You're willing to take risks. You're willing to problem solve. You're willing to be creative. You're willing to go above and beyond. You said it earlier, right? Why would it be any different in a workplace? I mean, honestly, like we think we can separate home and work. We have done for centuries. And we think, leave your personal life at the door. Just don't bring any baggage into the workplace. Just come in and be professional, become an automaton and do what we tell you and ask no questions. Well, guess what, folks? Life's moved on and people ask questions because we're curious and we want to be engaged. And the way to get engaged is to feel like your business really cares about you. And I think
Yeah.
it's undervalued as a core principle. It's a little bit like people talk a lot about kindness. I think they're linked. You being clear doesn't come at the expense of being kind. You can do both. Being caring doesn't come at the expense of being successful. You can be both. I
Right.
think these polarities that we tend to throw into the workplace, they don't have to exist. We can have both. But
Yeah.
fundamentally, I'm pretty sure every business wants to be successful. And you can do that. And you will probably do that even more if you could encourage your people to care and
Yeah.
if you cared about them.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
So again, it's interesting. We're saying all these stats and everything, and I know you're in finance. If we, in finance, we rely on stats, we rely on metrics, and we should be doing the same thing in HR-led, emotionally intelligence cultures that focus on empathy and humanity and, caring about your employees while still holding them accountable, but setting them up for success, creating SMART goals, KPIs, and then letting them know through communication you're doing well or you're not doing well. They're not just nice to have things, they're 100% important. So, thank you so much for coming today here. Before we wrap up, when will your book be coming out, or is it already out? The
it
Through
is
Line.
out. Yeah, it is out. It came out in April. Thank you for asking. It's available wherever books are sold.
Okay. I'll
Um,
make sure that we have a link to it in the podcast notes. Hey, how
Thank you.
can people connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn. There's a website related to the book, which is archanamohan.net. And yeah, I'd love to hear from folks once you read the book, what you think, questions, anything you disagree with. Love to engage.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hey, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this. I enjoyed it. It gave me some little clarification and then also reminders of like, okay, might need to fine tune a few conversations I'm about to have. So thank you so much. I hope this podcast has been beneficial and helpful to you. Just a reminder, if you go to the Aurora Training Advantage website and listen to the podcast there, you will get SHRM and HRCI credits for your certifications.